Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack here at the IrishHotspur, joined by Harry Kane's #1 lover, his #1 hair enthusiast, hairline redemption enthusiast, and we also have Simon Yemaine here, who Dave and I have actually grown to be big fans of on Twitter, mostly because I feel like all of his takes are usually correct, but also, too, I think he's just been covering, this Harry Kane saga, as well as the Paratici saga, a lot of stuff that Dave and I have sort of agreed with. Maybe this might turn into a bit of a bubble, where we're just sort of all agreeing with each other. Hopefully Simon maybe disagrees with us on something at some stage to make it a good combo. But Simon, thanks for doing this. Tell us, the Irish Hotspur community about yourself, what you like about being a Spurs fan, what you hate, and about your, sort of Twitter as well, if you like.
Ja, tack så mycket för att ni tar in mig här på podcasten. Simon Yemaine heter jag. Jag har varit ett fan från Sverige väldigt länge. Ja, och jag menar, jag bara gillar vad ni grabbar gör. Jag är väldigt tacksam för att jag fick vara här idag.
Get in the let's get in the Swedish subtitles in for this one. I absolutely love it. YouTube might, expand us out to Kulusevski's fan club.
Oh, yeah. I forgot you guys aren't Swedish. You look like typical Swedes, that's for sure. You even got the hat on and everything. Yeah, so
Dave likes the tracksuits too.
My name is Simon. I'm a Swedish TV producer and director, writer. I'm semi-long-term Spurs fans, 10 years going. Started tweeting about Spurs maybe 2-3 years ago. You find me at the thfc if you're looking at the beautiful, fabulous live shows. Simon at Simon Yemaine. I'm a pretty positive Spurs fan. I try at least not to take this ridiculous club too seriously. I'm also stoic, which helps me deal with the madness that is this fan base and
definitely need that
this club ownership. And I'm just happy to be here, happy for the compliments, and a big fan of you guys as well.
Appreciate you coming on.
Is that better? That was better in the Swedish version, right?
You don't have to be fans of us, everyone's welcome to share their opinions, but I do appreciate that you're a fan of us.
I have seen, and I told you guys off air that I've seen a lot of you guys long tactical videos breaking down Conte and new players, and so when I'm saying I'm a fan, I am a fan. I mean, I think I'm like most Spurs fans, especially if you're newer to the internet space when it comes to being a Spurs fan, because at least 7-8 first years was just watching their games on the telly and going over maybe once every half a decade. But when you get into Spurs, you actually watch everything. You show the podcast medium and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube for whatever you can do to find like-minded people.
Yeah,
no,
100%.
Absolutely.
100%. That's how I got into it myself. I was struggling with Tottenham at the time, and I stumbled across YouTube. And here we are today.
Bro, I remember when you started this. I remember when you started tweeting about doing this, because you started out like being a guest on what's that show?
I was on Weird Tottenham TV and Matty Hayes as well.
Exactly. So I used to see you when you called in to that show, and so I followed you. I see all.
Even as far back as the tactical breakdowns, I'm very impressed. Impressed.
Joe's here, right?
I'm flattered.
Yeah, and I have to apologize for the bad lighting here. I'm not trying to make myself look mysterious. I'm at my mom's place in my little office, and this is all the light I can muster today.
Well, I think we just need to hear your beautiful voice, and sadly, English doesn't sound as good as Swedish, so we're gonna have to, keep you, your answers, maybe on the Harry Kane saga at least, for us to understand, in the language we can all understand of the UK. And Harry Kane saga, Simon, I mean, you sort of had a tweet today that I think really, rung true with me about how sort of Daniel Levy has kind of continuously made things hard on Ange, it feels like this summer. Him accepting a late bid for Bayern Munich, do you feel like this is more reflection of that? And just give me your general thoughts as well on just this whole Harry Kane saga and what's happened today.
I mean, to really make sense of it, I have to start from the beginning, from my point of view. So I always thought when we got into this season that we have like different perspectives of this. We have the perspective of what's best for the club, the perspective of what's best for Harry, and then just us trying to analyze how Levy looks at it. And so, from my perspective, looking at it from the club side and the Harry side, I thought the deal was unlikely, especially because if I look at it from Harry's perspective, waiting and going as a free agent, that's what I would tell him to do if I was in his camp. And we all know why. He can pick and choose from all the big clubs in the world. He can stay potentially in the Premier League. I think there's a higher risk, I think it's high potential for clubs like Liverpool, City, and United being in for him, even if they have a striker. We have to remember he will be on like a free transfer. I thought it would be better for him in the sense economic, like financially, get like a big sign-on bonus, so we get bigger wages. It's bigger, much better for his brand. And so that's what I started out. And looking at it from the Spurs perspective, I never thought. I think it's muddled because as a fan, I don't really care about the money. I care about Kane being one of our legends, and me being able to see him for one more year in our shirt is invaluable. But looking at it from kind of this logical financial perspective, I also thought, I mean, is he really what he's worth to us? It's hard to gauge.
Put a value on.
Yeah, put a value on, because I mean, with him, we have an honest chance at top four and all the financial benefits. And also from Levy's perspective as an unpopular owner and chairman, selling him after 10 years of not winning anything, that's a bad look.
Good point.
So looking at it from his perspective, I can get a couple of more months trying to convince him, and at least Spurs fans will respect that. I thought that would weigh higher. I thought that would be a higher priority for him than just cashing in on 80 something million. And then looking at the potential buyers from a financial standpoint, the moment Bayern came up as a potential buyer, looking at their transfer history and knowing 80 million euros was their biggest bid ever, then Bayern came for 115 seemed improbable, and selling Kane for less from just a reputational standpoint for Levy, less than players like Rice or Grealish. History would not look kind on Levy for that, even a year left. And I think Levy cares about that more than people might realize. So all these things came together, and so I thought for sure he wasn't going. And I kind of went through the summer kind of annoyed at all these big accounts and aggregators saying, "Oh, he's leaving." So I'm actually really surprised they touched it, because now, even with one day before the Premiership starts, for basically the same amount they offered 2 weeks ago. It's so odd to me. It makes me wonder if he's not covering his bases. If Levy isn't thinking, let's cover my bases with both sets of fans. Let's make sure I accept an offer, so fans will think it's stupid to let him go for free. Can't say I didn't try to sell him, and let's cover my ass with the fans that wants him to stay, because it's likely he will say no. It might.
You kind of feel like he's sort of trying to satisfy the financial heads that are Spurs fans that are thinking with their mind. And he also wants to satisfy the Spurs fans that are thinking more with their heart about keeping Harry Kane at the same time. And to be fair, it also feels like Harry Kane is trying to satisfy both Spurs fans as well as everybody. He's like trying to not make it look like he's throwing us under the bus in any way. He's willing to stick with it. if it comes to that, but he's also thinking about his future as well. But it also just like maybe two different people here trying not to cause absolute uproar so that they don't get scapegoated and pretty much just hung out to dry by the fan base to be, as a punching bag. So I guess it's just this battle of reputation saving, or what do you call it? Yeah, like, just trying to save your identity, save your reputation.
On the financial side, though, we got to remember we're not the club we once were when we were selling the likes of the Bale and the Modric. Back then, with the club we did need them finances, and I can accept that. But with the club we are now, with the billionaire owners in the league, and with the amount of money that we generate through, the bigger stadium being built, which brings in a lot more ticket revenue, with the Spurs Play platform, the massive merch store they now have open. I believe they got 2 of them open around London, and everything else. All the other sort of now the go-karting track coming in. You've got the Skywalk. We've got more revenue incomes than most other clubs in the Premier League. I would say, if not then all other clubs in the Premier League, in terms of diversifying the revenue. And the reason why all the new stadium was brought about to be able to diversify the revenue is to avoid this situation of selling your best players so that we could keep them and we could become a European superpower. But selling Harry Kane and accepting the bid a day out from the opener of the season, which starts tomorrow, I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous, and it goes against everything that we were told, over the last few years about finances, building the stadium, etc. It just goes against everything that we were told why that stadium was built. Obviously, it was helped build to get more Spurs fans in there because there was demand, but all the diversified revenue streams were so that we could avoid this situation in the future, so that we can compete with the financial superpowers. That's why we have so much diversified revenue. So on the revenue one, although I understand it, I don't agree with it, especially with the amount of money in football nowadays. And plus, we're not the club we once were. I can understand, like I said, I can accept them with the Bale and Modric because at the time we were snapping up property all around to be able to build this stadium. But once this stadium was built, we should not be in this situation.
Accepting also money this late too, Simon. Sorry, I was going to ask you, maybe accepting money this late into the window. How much does that even help you, accepting money this late in the window? But sorry,
that's what I that's as well. No, that's I was going to go into that because I mean, first and foremost, we have to recognize that it's complex. There's so many perspectives you have to look at. That's why all these takes you see often come short, because you have to look at it from what's best for Kane. Like, okay, is it ambitious to go to Bayern Munich, to go to a less competitive, less seen league where you're basically farming trophies? Like, is that really ambitious, or is it ambitious to stay in the best league in the world, compete against the best now and for the years to come? Or is it more ambitious to actually wait, look at all the options, and then go to the absolute best teams where you can, again, compete at a higher level? So all these phrases, all these perspectives, and then you have to look at it from Levy's side, his reputation, like the PR side of it, the financial side of it, and every aspect has these different kind of shoots where you have to kind of almost game theory kind of think it through to see the full picture. And so selling now when you basically can't get in, that's the thing we know. We know that 80 million is not going to be used well or being used quickly. It's going to be a struggle. You can't replace Kane. Like Kane is this club and has been for a long time. And so it's the undecisiveness and the sense of not having a strategy that you effectively execute on. Because if he really wanted to sell Kane, he would state the price and he would have set a deadline. Like, if you come in for this price at the end of July, we'll sell it. After that, it's a no-go. But he keeps, shifting, and moving the goalpost. And that's what's frustrating, because it makes us speculate and change. Because we have to change the way we assess what's likely. Because now I would have said it would cost 30 130, 150 because it's so late. But then he goes and does this, and it makes you question everything. But it's absolutely ridiculous if it happens this way, and I wouldn't be happy about it. I wouldn't even understand it, to be honest.
Do you know what? I feel Daniel Levy accepting it this late. He's trying to put the ball in Harry Kane's court. I think he's trying to gamble on the reports that came out from the Kane side last week that basically said if a deal is not done by Brentford, it's not fair on Tottenham and not fair on Ange Postecoglou, and that he will stay. And I feel that Daniel Levy has left it this way to accept in the window, to leave it in Harry Kane's court and go, okay, well, there's an offer on the table. We're going to let you go. What do you want to do? Do you want to sign a new contract at Tottenham, or do you want to leave? However,
that's what I mean. Like, it feels like he made a decision, and then now he's paying the PR part. Like, okay, I know this is going to happen. Let me just play it out in a way that will protect me from the perspective of fans and whatever.
And the thing is, for me, I think I don't agree with it, because I think what Daniel Levy is hoping that Harry Kane goes, okay, give me that contract, I'll sign it. However, I think it might actually have a negative effect on it and sort of maybe push Kane back towards Bayern Munich, the fact that he has done this. Because, look, the only one that hasn't come out looking good from this is Harry Kane. That's it, But Daniel Levy as well, I think he's tough negotiator. Sorry, Jack?
No, I was saying, like, is he sort of putting Kane between a rock and a hard place here intentionally, Daniel Levy? Is he kind of like, pulling the rug from underneath him and kind of making him have to make the final decision at the very last minute? And he has to make a rush decision now, and he'll probably look either like the hero to Spurs fans, or he'll look like the villain. But then Daniel Levy all of a sudden gets to kind of save face last minute.
So let's play it out from Kane's perspective. He's got a wife who's pregnant, and he's got kids who all go to school, and she's pregnant like in the 8th or 9th month, so she's like pregnant. It's one day before the start of the Premier League. It's 2 days before the start of the final, that Bayern have a final against, I think, LEVY. He's got 5 months until he can just wait 5 months and make this other decision where he can get more money, more prestige, and play for a better side, and get a sign-on bonus that will probably be around 20, 30. It can be a lot of money. Basically cover a year's salary or something like that, 2 years salary. So if you look at it now, from his perspective, when I see people say, oh, now he needs to go to show ambition, I'm like, wait a minute, it's perfectly sensible for him to wait now. Because if he accepts, it basically means staying in a hotel, having his kids and wife stay in England, because he's probably got a hospital she's supposed to
that she's been already going to.
The kids in school, and so why would he put himself in that situation now? And I do think I think Levy is smart enough to know this, and so to me it feels like they're in agreement here. Like it's more of a sense of, let's cover my bases, let's leave this in Kane's hands. And so I think it's perfectly sensible if he says no.
I think what's happened there is Daniel Levy has basically said, so that he can stand back and say that if Kane does decide to stay and not sign a new contract, he can say, well, I did accept that bid, and it's not on me. Whereas
I didn't let him go for free.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want people to fall for this, because Daniel Levy should have been the one that should have set this deadline, not Harry Kane. Daniel Levy, especially if you're being proactive about this football club on the pitch, which is what we've needed over the last few years, especially now that we've made a manager change and a change in the style of football. You've got to be proactive about backing that, especially with all the noise around you as a chairman and around Joe Lewis as well. And it just stinks of incompetency, to be honest with you, because let's go on to how Ange may be feeling, right? 3 days out from the season, he's about to lose his captain, he's about to lose his best player, his goal scorer, the one that puts the gloss on everything else that everyone does behind him and the build up to that section. And let's be honest about it, it's like people will say, oh, you can get any striker that'll score goals. Yeah, to a certain degree. But with Harry Kane, it's about the calmness in that moment that Richarlison doesn't have. Richarlison is rash. He snatches that thing. He loses that composure. And that's why he does not get the same amount of goals as someone like Harry Kane does. And it will have a detriment on Ange Postecoglou. I don't want anyone to sit here and pretend that Ange Postecoglou will be okay with it. He will not be okay with it. He will be upset. He will be pissed off that this has gone on this long. Ange Postecoglou would have wanted this done before preseason to know exactly what he had to work with going into preseason, in the training drills, coming back from preseason, etc. So this puts Ange Postecoglou in a position, where he has to rearrange absolutely everything going into the season. Plus, Simon, you've said it, I've said it, I've heard Jack saying it, I've heard plenty of other people saying it. This rebuild, you keep Harry Kane, it accelerates the process. Harry Kane will keep you to a certain level. You sell Harry Kane, all of a sudden you're looking at all these other individuals
looking a lot
asking
harder.
them to step up where they haven't necessarily stepped up before, even with Kane in the team. And I don't want to hear anyone say, oh, that's because of Kane. No, it's not. These players, they just have not stepped up. So, look, it'd be interesting to see what happens. But Ange Postecoglou will not be happy about this. And there's a number of other things as well. And not only that is he losing his star striker. He'd be well aware that the problems in that back line ain't fixed. So now you're losing 30 goals a season. You're losing the 22 points that Kane amassed you last season. That come the end of the season has a severe knock-on effect to your league position. And we're still shipping the same amount of goals at the same rate that we were. So, unless he gets that sorted out, which ideally, again, he would have wanted sorted out before we went on preseason. So I just feel that with everything that's going on across this summer, I get Ange Postecoglou has handled it very well. But I have no doubt, as a manager, he's absolutely pissed off, Jacko.
No, I do think he's pissed off, but I sort of, when you're bringing up how he's kind of been left in the dark this whole time with the Kane situation, he's then been left to sort of work with two star strikers. But when you have two star strikers, I know there is a big difference between Richarlison and Kane, but they both have their strengths and they kind of both are just operate in different styles. So I know we continue to say the Postecoglou kind of striker is going to sort of kind of behave in a similar way to how it was with Kyogo, but you still think there are these little intricacies that, kind of come into it where, Kane can do this, but Richarlison can do this. And you kind of look for these little strengths that they may have and you play to them. But if you're left in the dark, the whole summer about which star striker is going to be actually playing the 38 matches for you, right? Because Richarlison is either going to be playing more of, again, kind of a bit of a rotational role, or he's going to be playing the starter's role. But Postecoglou has had no opportunity this whole summer to be able to decide which guy is actually going to be his sort of starting striker for the remainder of the season. And I would imagine that's a bit of a headache going into things because you're sort of left, deciding still what is your best team, what is the team you're putting your faith to and kind of your most concentration and your most kind of mental kind of minutes into. So that's what I think is Postecoglou. As much as Spurs fans, I think, continue to sort of complain oh, I just hate this saga. It never ends. Can we just end it today? I mean, imagine how Postecoglou feels with all of it. He actually is the one making the decisions on the pitch with the actual consequences to them. And he's been left probably more in the dark and probably been given less clarity than really anybody else, because Spurs fans at times have been told that Harry Kane wants to stay, but Ange this whole time has just been left with really no actual firm shake of any kind that his striker has been staying. And I feel bad for the guy. I do feel like his hands have been sort of kind of tied behind his back. I think he's doing a pretty good job actually with it thus far. Credit to the guy, but I still think he is being kind of set up, to have a pretty rough ride, at least for the first month, because he's had so much uncertainty. But what do you think, Simon? Just between Richarlison and Kane, that must be a headache that he just doesn't even know which one he's going to be using all season.
I mean, goes back to the preseason. I think Levy, we keep seeing this disconnect between the financial side and what's best for the club. And so we see this new coach coming in, and we know he needs time, and he needs to know who his players are, and we also know basically what parts of the team need strengthening. So what do? We book a tour in Asia where it's rain season, not in one country, but in 3 countries. So it's 20 hours to Australia, then it's another 10 to Singapore, then
That's
it's
right.
another whatever to new country. So they barely. It's basically the worst
We
type
spent more
of
time on the plane nearly.
more time on the plane. It's rain season, so games get canceled. Teams teams that were supposed to play, like Roma and Leicester, don't show up. So we have to kind of put together some last minute ditch game against Barcelona where the first team can't even play because they played the day before. And then we wait until the last possible minute to buy a star CV. We don't even buy the best suited one or the most reliable one. We buy the one that was supposed to be cheaper, but for the same price as basically reportedly Tapsoba was valued at. So I don't think that price is even that much cheaper. But again, it's like the buck before what's best for the preseason. And then we have all these things settled, and it's a couple of days before preseason. And Kane has set a deadline saying, "I want to stay here if you don't, make this deal happen at a timely fashion, so I can prepare." And so when everything's settled and it's a couple of days before, and everyone feels positive and everything feels like it's going forward, then you accept the bid, disrupting everything again. So it keeps being this disconnect between what's best for the club to find success on the pitch and what's financially best, because we know that Asia Tour is all about sponsorships and fan service, and it's not what's best for preparing for this season. And so that's frustrating.
And that's the thing, though, lads, is that, when you look at it, you're going into this season, you've got so many clubs ahead of you doing the right thing, already so far into their models that are showing them results. Then you've got the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea, probably expected to be back in and around that sniffing point this year. And it's sort of like, if there's any year with the amount of sort of billionaire owners and other clubs devising their own models to be able to sort of compete, this is the year we had to get things right, and we had to give Ange Postecoglou the best chance heading into the season. And this was my biggest fear all along. And I know some people maybe don't agree with the timing of when I say things, because sometimes things can be all happy, and I can say, I think there's a few problems arising here. And it turns out usually a few days down the line or a couple of weeks down the line, them fears sort of come to fruition. And it's sort of like, it's going to have a knock-on effect into the Premier League season. And it should not be that way. It shouldn't be that way. Most clubs operate that they have their sort of core squad together for the manager to sort of operate and use with preseason. Then, maybe getting a player or two and get him to fit in between that end of preseason tour and the start of the Premier League season and fit them in. But now we're going into a Premier League season where we've got to try and get Van de Ven to adapt. That's going to take games into the season now. There are going to be mistakes with him until that is ironed out across that back line, which is going to cost us points. Vicario, I'm still not 100% sold on him. I think his positioning for Bayern Munich's fourth goal was way off. Way off. And I'm concerned about that slightly. I've seen some good things, but I've seen some bad things. So that's a relative unknown going into this season. Then you go into the midfield. Yeah, they're all great at keeping the ball, but as we've seen with preseason, as soon as we get broke on, there's no one in there to be that hard man to take them out, bring down them moves, or win the ball back. So that's a problem. And then now you're taking out a 30-goal a season striker. I think since Harry Kane started with Tottenham in the Premier League, he averages you 24 goals every single season. And now you're taking that out. So all of a sudden you're going into a season, and we don't know what our best 11 is. We don't know what our squad is going to look like. What we thought coming into this summer transfer window, which was easy, get rid of your best or get rid of your worst players, keep your best players, is now turning into a window where we're starting to sell some of our best players, because I think Højbjerg is very close on his way out to Atletico Madrid, and we've still got all the shit kept around. But yet we're going into this season with fake hope, fake optimism, expecting that some of these old guys that we know are not good enough are going to come in and all of a sudden change, which is not necessarily going to be the case. We've seen that with Eric Dyer this preseason. We've seen it with Sanchez this preseason. We've seen it with Davies at time this preseason as well. So for me, it's sort of like we're going into the season with too many unknowns, and we're expecting Ange Postecoglou to come in and hit the ground running. I get everyone goes, oh, but Dave, we know we're in a rebuild now. Great. But the reality is at elite level sports and the way football has gone over the last decade, managers do not get time. If you are not winning games and there is no sort of, what would you call, positive signs on the pitch, he's out of here. That's it. And the media is not going to give Postecoglou the same grace or ask the same questions about Tottenham Hotspur the way they did when Conte was in charge, the way they did when Jose Mourinho was in charge. Because them guys have European trophies. They have Premier Leagues behind them. And Postecoglou doesn't have that. We already seen the reaction of him getting the job at Celtic and at Tottenham. That media is still going to follow him around. And the minute he starts losing games, they'll put the pressure on and fans will turn. They've done it with Antonio Conte. I remember Jamie Carragher came out and said after Conte's words, no, you have to get rid of him now. And I said, okay, rather than falling into that, let's go back and see what Jamie Carragher said when Conte was hired. Well, guess what? Jamie Carragher said Antonio Conte will need longer than 18 months at Tottenham Hotspur to fix the problems, but yet there he is sitting there saying you have to sack him. So it's sort of like, you know, and then Spurs fans bought into that, and a lot of Spurs fans use what Jamie Carragher said about the situation, saying, no, yeah, he's spot on, that's why you have to sack him. And it's sort of like, we've seen it all summer long with the media. You know, you've got to sell Harry Kane. Harry Kane has to win trophies, blah, 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 blah. Okay. But it's the same media that don't give Owen Hargreaves the same respect as they do Scholes, Lampard, Gerrard, people like that of the English era, even though he played for Bayern Munich and won trophies out there. So it's sort of like, I just see this very, very quickly turning into a disaster. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say we're not going to score goals, because we are. But one thing, Jack, you pointed on it. It's sort of like people say, oh, but the goals were spread around at Celtic. Okay, granted, they were. People chipped in. Great. Because Ange Postecoglou was able to get the system to be able to suit other players, to put them in better positions to be able to score goals. Fantastic. But what no one mentions, he got rid of Giacomakis. He brought in Furuhashi. He's the best striker in Scotland. He scored 30 goals for Celtic last season. And fucked Giacomakis off to the MLS. So Ange Postecoglou does need that lethal striker up front to put away his moves. It's that simple, and it's madness to think that we don't need that level striker to be able to finish off the moves. Of course we do. You know, all these people that say, oh, it doesn't matter, we won't miss Harry Kane's goals. Of course you are. When the games get tough, when they get tight, like they were last season, Harry Kane amassed us 22 points on his own with goals in tight games and equalizers. You don't have that this season. Okay, some of the games, some players might step up, but they won't. But I reckon you're going to be 10 to 15 points worse off, and you will only really see the effect of it come the end of the season, in my opinion. And in the tight games during the season, when you don't have Harry Kane there, is when you're going to feel the effect of not having him. So for the club to decide to sell him is only pissing Ange Postecoglou off, not giving him a very good chance to succeed at Tottenham, and just pissing the fan base off, especially a day out from the season. But we got to stop this narrative that, we'll always, we don't need Harry Kane's goals. Harry Kane scores 40% of Tottenham's goals all across the Premier League. 40%. You're taking that out the team. And when you look at the players that we're looking at replacing them with, they're all youngsters with potential. Fuck me, lads. We've got loads of them in the squad. Will Lancashire, Sunsup Bell, Scarlett, Parrott. The new guy, Valise, that we're after signing. We've got loads of them. But what we're not seeing is links to quality strikers, world-class strikers that will come in and replace his goals. And we will need his goals. This whole thing that we don't need his goals is absolute nonsense.
I think right time.
Preach on, brother. Go.
I was gonna say, I think he broke his own record maybe for consecutive, minutes reached there. But I was gonna say, rightly or wrongly, selling Harry Kane, it's more just the timing of it. Like, just to do it this late is, I think, no matter what, going to be, absolutely just going to hinge or put Postecoglou in a bad position here. And it feels like it's just something that Levy loves to do at this stage. He just loves to make, I think, or Levy just loves to put any manager, I think, you know, kind of with a trial by fire sort of type situation. With Jose Mourinho, he brought in, what was it, Joe Rodon instead of Kim Min-jae and a bunch of other quality center backs. He also brought in, you know, some other players that really were not the quality that he truly needed. You look at then Nuno had a similar situation to what Postecoglou has had. Even though he probably wasn't going to survive in the first place, he still did have a bunch of uncertainty over the whole summer. It didn't really get a lot of backing in the transfer market either. And you also then had Antonio Conte, who had to continue to persist with Eric Dyer, Sanchez, Davies, and the whole kind of usual suspects. So you just sort of think like, feels like every summer each manager has in some way had their hands tied behind their back, or in some way have had some sort of kind of, you know, some things to trip over and some things to kind of, you know, fall in their way. But it feels like Postecoglou was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be us learning from this and kind of give him the best chance no matter what, even if it was a rebuild, even if we weren't going to be challenging as much as we had in previous seasons. It was supposed to be making the rebuild as easy as possible. And I think that's what it comes down to. And I don't think Spurs have made the rebuild as easy as possible for Ange. They're making it harder and harder, and they're leaving it actually more uncertain. But Simon, I know you had a tweet that Dave and I wanted to pick out today. And you said, I'm so excited, though, about this Spurs season. Yes, we will suck at times, maybe even for a good while, but I'm giving everyone time because I know the struggles we will face are a part of the process, necessary steps on the way back to success and our true identity as a club. What struggles do you think we will face, Simon, on that kind of a beautiful tweet that you had?
So, I mean, I think I'm generally a pretty positive guy, and so I've gone into every coaching hire with that aspect. And I don't know if that's because I'm old and I'm used to working in projects, where you know that every time you try to build something new, you will have hits and falls, and the chances of success comes down to patience, belief, and perseverance, basically. And so I still believe Jose could have succeeded if we would have bought into what he is and what he needs. We didn't, so he failed. Still think we could have succeeded with Conte if we would have bought into that process, into his needs, and backed him in a way that would have been constructive. I think we failed, and so I think we failed to back him, and so I think we failed as a club. Now, I'm more excited about Ange for a couple of different reasons. I mean, first and foremost, because I believe in this type of football more than I believe in the type of football and philosophy of Jose Conte. I believe in his personality more than I believe in it. I think the way he communicates is elite. And as someone that works with communication, I've always thought that his ability to say the right thing at the right time and be clear and be decisive in how he communicates is something especially a club like us need. Because we have very little communication from the higher ups at our club. So the coach at Spurs needs to be an effective communicator. And I also believe in his track record. I'm not one of those people that think that success in the lower club can transfer to a better league, because it's all comparative. When he coached in Scotland, when he coached in Japan, when he coached in Australia, he's at that level, but in comparison to the other teams, he still came out on top. And so give him more resources at a higher level, and I believe he can succeed, especially when he has the philosophy that's modern. Now, and I also think that, you know, you need buy-in from fans, and when a coach fits in the philosophy with the fan culture and the history of the club, the media, the fans, everyone gives them a little bit more time because they understand the idea. I do think like Conte and Jose works for Chelsea because it's a soulless club that's all about, you know, winning now, and they will spend anything to succeed. I don't think Conte or Jose would have succeeded at Liverpool or United because their philosophy, or at Barcelona because their philosophy around what type of football they want to see it's more similar to us. Whilst both of them probably could have succeeded at Madrid, who as a club is more similar to Chelsea, if you catch my drift. But also looking at the preseason games, the way the pace at which he's had improved the team is extremely encouraging. You have to remember we have a really big squad, like 35 players, 39 maybe. And to be able to put up that B side against Barcelona and still perform at that level is impressive to me. That means that it's not only the 11 best players that he's been able to communicate, been able to instill this new philosophy into. It's even the likes of Sanchez and Skip, who scored 2 goals. That means, and we saw that fail with both Conte and Jose. Every time we put out like a B side, people, the non-starters, we would struggle massively. The team didn't look like they'd ever played with each other. Now it looked like a team, and so all those factors have made me believe that even if we struggle, I think Ange is in a good position to succeed.
I get the point you're trying to make there. Here's where maybe I slightly disagree. I'm not sold on the likes of some of these guys over the preseason. Yes, they've acclimatized to his way, but they were dreadful under Nuno and acclimatized to Conte's way for the rest of that first season, which helped us get Champions League football. I remember at the start of the season, people were using Sanchez's stats off the back of the season before, and bringing him into the following season, telling me how great he is, the clean sheets that we keep when he's in the back line. Same as Eric Dyer. And my point is, I've seen this time and time again with these players. When Conte first walked in, Dyer was pinging passes around. Sanchez was doing his job. But once the summer transfer window came around and going into the new season, all of a sudden that stopped. It was the same under Jose Mourinho. Jose Mourinho had his top of the Premier League. All of a sudden, they could not keep up with the demands, the pressure, and the focus on them. It tailed off. And I think it's going to be the exact same with Ange Postecoglou. It's going to tail off. These players have a history of doing it and adapting to the manager's styles and systems for the first few months. People buy into it, and then all of a sudden it tails off. But we also do some business. And when they're next to go in line out the door, performances drop off a cliff. Manager doesn't do this in training. Manager doesn't do that in training. Manager's doing this, manager's doing that. And quite frankly, they don't like being given out to or taking any sort of responsibility for what they do on the football pitch. And then all of a sudden they blame the manager. And I'm sorry, but I'm sick of this culture at Tottenham Hotspur. A winning culture is, if someone has a go at you in an argument, which, let's be honest, it happens at elite level sports all the time. Look at the way people in American football speak to each other on the sidelines and everything. They're roaring in each other's faces and absolutely everything, But the difference is, if you want to go and cry about it, go and enjoy League Two. If you want to use it as motivation, go and enjoy picking up trophies. So what we need to do is just get rid of the excuse culture. And the reason why they do it is because they're protecting their wages. They're protecting
let me specify what, I'm sorry, but let me just specify what I mean then. What I mean when I say he even got the B team playing better, I don't mean that playing better to a level where I want to keep any of them. I still, so I think my belief is I still think they will leave, but him being able to even, I think that's just a proof of, I look at it as a proof of concept more than, he made Sanchez or Dyer or Reguilon good enough to keep. I still believe we will get rid of them because I also feel like he's much more what you're talking about, much more winning and ruthless side to him than we might talk about, because he's also so he's so he's so good at communicating, and he's so positive, and he's so got such a great outlook on the future. I'm just saying, as a proof of concept, that shows me that with such a disruptive preseason, he even got the other players, and some of them we're gonna need, like Paratici, Solomon, Richie, whatever. He even got them to play in the right way in a very short time. And so that makes me feel like if we can do what you're saying, get rid of the people and players that we don't need, because 30, I think we have 38 players.
Yeah.
It needs to go down to 25 at least.
Yeah.
I
That
think
needs to happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you're both right. Where like, what you're trying to, the way I understood your point, Simon, was that you're trying to say that Ange has come into this Premier League with a lot of doubts. Can he even play with these sort of players? But he's shown that he can make it work at any level, whether it's complete amateurs or players that are, maybe just in the outskirts of, the world, kind of playing in whatever league that may be. It could be the MLS, could be Mexico, could be Japan, and he'll still make his football work. And he'll make players that are lesser talented, lesser technically skilled, still be able to play this beautiful brand of football. And now that he's working with much higher technically skilled players, he's showing that he can actually do even more so. But then you were saying too, like, look at what he's able to do with, he's able to get Sanchez to play out of the back. He's able to get Dyer to try to do it as well. Dyer actually struggled compared to Sanchez. Sanchez looked more like Sanchini in comparison to Dyer. But I feel like it
was
felt
almost
like
less about the individual performances. It was much more about like they played like a team. It shows me, because he's a system coach, it shows that his system, that he's very effective at communicating the system. Conte, as comparison, was not.
Correct. And there's that humility that sort of comes with that. And that Jose and Conte were criticized by Spurs fans in the past for the fact that, like, they can only make it work with world-class players. Whereas Postecoglou has always been kind of credited for being able to make it work with almost anybody, like, at his disposal. And that's what maybe the big difference here is. Where Dave, though, I think is right is in the fact that these players, though, have shown that they can, maybe slightly adapt to Postecoglou's system, but they've also shown that they can adapt to Mourinho's. They've also shown that they can adapt
so it's both things.
Conte's. So it's like they are a bit imposter-like. Yeah,
it's like it's what you focus on. So if focusing on the positive, we have a good coach who's good at making the most of what we have, but looking at what he needs, and the negative side is that we have a lot of players not good enough. Not for this level, and not for this system, and not for this coach. So both things needs to happen for us to have success. But the problem is, okay, Ange can do everything he can with the system, with improving players, but then we have this club side, the financial side, the ownership that needs to execute their part of the job, and we keep struggling with that part of the side of the structure at the club. Getting in players at the right time, selling players at the right time, giving the coach time, giving coach a preseason that's effective and gives the coach the most time. And so being skeptical about this part happening, the part that you're talking about, is probably healthy, but it's also trauma. See, and that's what we always have to struggle against as Spurs fans. No, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying you have to struggle as Spurs fans, because it's a healthy way to be a Spurs fan where you're skeptical. You have to be skeptical to protect yourself, because you have a good week, that means you're going to have a bad week.
He doesn't want them to ruin
it. The trauma is also, when the trauma takes over, is when you can't see the possibilities in, and I'm not saying you're doing that, but I'm saying the trauma is when we get the skeptical side takes over to where we can't judge the new data points. So Ange is a new data point. He's different than Conte. He's different than Joseph. And also,
I think,
and stuff happens, and so you learn. So when Paratici came in, everyone was really skeptical, because but then he did both a good job and he made some mistakes. But how you looked at it came down to your mentality. Like, if you focused on the good part, or if you focused on all the mistakes, like Nuno.
Paratici is an interesting comparison.
So you know what I'm saying? So we have to kind of, that's the confusing part of being a fan of this stuff.
Yeah, look, 100%. I get the point you're making. However, for me, when I look at it, when we come up against two teams of note, Barcelona, West Ham, the evidence is there that we are not good enough to compete with them. If we do not change that back line, the same problems are still there. And I get, you know, people say it's trauma, but it's evidence. You know, I'm not making up that Jose Mourinho was top of the league with some of them guys in the back line, but ultimately it ended up coming back to haunt him. And, you know, same with Antonio Conte. He got his Champions League last season. Then we finished way off it because of guys that he's being made use. And this gets to your other point, Simon, where the club have to be putting these managers in the best position to be able to succeed. When you go into this window, we all knew the first thing you got to do is that back line and goalkeeper. We haven't done it. We still got guys as deputies. And with Romero, we know there's going to be suspensions and injuries. And with Van de Ven, if he doesn't adapt, all of a sudden, Dyer, Sanchez, or the likes are waiting in the wings to come back in. And what you do then is when you bring these guys in, you start making managers second guess themselves because they look at training and go, Dyer's been unreal this week. I'm going to select him. Come match day, Dyer makes a poor decision, cost us the game. The next week, then he goes, okay, well, I'm going to put Sanchez out there. And then Sanchez cost him. So what you're doing is you're actually put managers in a position where they start second guessing themselves on what they have to do. The manager that we're talking about, Antonio Conte, yeah, he made some mistakes at Tottenham, but everywhere else he's been, 99% of the time, he didn't make any mistakes. And that's because they provide him with the tools necessary to do his job and implement his system. The same with Jose Mourinho everywhere else he has been. They provide him with the tools necessary to implement his system and get the job done. They haven't put them in positions where they're second guessing themselves and having to pick players that they do not trust. And the reality is, you know, once we changed the managerial position to head coach, it just showed for me from then on, the club will provide the players and it's up to you to get out there and coach them. But what you cannot do is coach someone that's just not good enough. What you cannot do is coach someone's mentality to be better in the heat of the moment. You either have it or you don't. But the club keep persisting with players that have shown time and time and time again they do not have it. The only thing that's changed at Tottenham Hotspur this summer is the manager and the style of play. The results more or less are still the same. I'm not getting hyped up over beating Lion City Sailors 5-1. I mean, I'm not being funny. I could grab 10 of my mates, put a team together and go and beat them. I'm not getting jumped up about being Shakhtar Donetsk the way we did either, especially, you know, with what's gone on with their whole footballing landscape has completely had to change, etc., etc. But when you look at West Ham, Barcelona, teams, you know, West Ham be coming up against in the Premier League, the same problems will come back to haunt us. So the only thing that's changed is
I'm saying I'm acknowledging all that. I'm sorry, my phone went. I'm acknowledging that, and I'm saying I'm not saying there's no evidence showing this being a less than effective club when it comes to all of that, and that's why I'm saying it's reasonable and it's probably healthy to be skeptical in that way. When I say trauma doesn't mean something didn't happen. Trauma is just what it does to your emotional state, where you focus on different things. And so I'm as traumatized as you, my lad. But we all process things in different ways, and we all have like this angel and devil on our shoulders, where you go, this club will fuck up everything it does, but then something new happens, and you have to give that new thing a chance to be the thing that changes something at least. And so I'm just saying, when I see the B team play better, when I focus on this thing, you're focusing on that thing, which is all true, but I'm focusing on this thing, which is okay. At least Ange has something about him, which makes me think that whatever good or bad thing he'll get, he'll do the best of it. So it's up to us, basically, as a club, and not even us. I mean, the club, people that actually make the decision, to do a better job than they're doing now. Because we can all agree that that's all we've done. We've basically pointed out everything they've done wrong. And I mean, the evidence is right there. And every time I think we've changed, I actually thought we changed when Paratici came in and Conte started getting players, and everything was so positive there in November last year, not November 2 years ago. And so, but then again, we do this thing of having 3 months without a coach and 4 different managers in a season. And so I think it's healthy to be skeptical, because it's the hope that kills you. But I also think I'm a stoic, so I have to focus a little bit on things I can control, and the things
we're all traumatized.
It's how I react to stuff. That's the only thing I can still control. So everything you're saying is right, and I don't think you should applaud that win against the Sailors or maybe not even the good play, but we have to also acknowledge that it wasn't the best team out, that it was some playing after just coming back from injury. Because if we don't do that, we become one of those, toxic fans.
Oh no, look,
and you're not one of those.
I accept all that. I think the club over the last few years since Paratici has come in, I think they are trying to change things. And I've always said it's going to take time. It may not be until you notice after Paratici is gone, the work or the change that guy has undertook at the football club. And I get about the son coming back from injury, and I'm not putting pressure on any of that.
No. And I get what you're saying. You're saying the proof is in the pudding, and I haven't seen any proof. And that's so valid. I think that's so valid. But also, you come back, and we're getting into philosophical areas here, but I think this is really interesting for us as different fans that process things differently. But sometimes I think, what can I do? I can only kind of choose to be miserable or try to joke about it, and to be fair, us as a Spurs fan, we're really good at coping. We're really good at being self-deprecating and having fun with what a mess we are. And so, what else can we do? I mean, Kane can leave tomorrow, and we can finish 8th this season.
No, yeah,
and we will suck at times, as I said. But we have a manager that I kind of like, and we're doing stuff really slowly. But some of the things we're actually doing, I like.
No, we try really hard to find that balance too, because we were really, I think, probably one of the few sort of channels or platforms that were really behind Højbjerg and Emerson, especially Emerson, during kind of their sort of toxic sort of kind of roads. And then too, even when I felt like there were a lot of times under Antonio Conte where things just kind of got a bit sort of kind of overblown and heated, we sort of kind of kept our head down and sort of kind of just kept things.
I fought for Conte until the end.
And it's just sort of how it is. And you sort of, I think, if I were to speak for Dave in this case, is that I think in the word of trauma, which is such a right word, I think Dave has just been traumatized too many times by this defense to, give it another shot of, even though Ange is going to make his best effort, and Ange might even make a better effort or a better job than even previous managers have with those sort of usual suspect type players. I think Dave just sort of feels like yet again, though, he will eventually
I have to say,
tripped up by, the same sort of
thing. When Ange came up, and we had Nagelsmann and Pochettino and Enrique, right? And I was with most of us feeling one of those three should be the manager. They have the most experience, they're the best choices. But then when they went away, and people like Slot, Amorim, and when they came in, the reason why I picked Ange, and I got a lot of flack for that, was because of all you're saying. Like, I don't trust the club to operate in an optimal way. So having the guy that's the best communicator, that's at least, I feel, emotionally have demands on what fans want to see and able to communicate that. That's going to be really important.
Shit deck of cards, right?
Exactly, because we know like they said, 2 months in, I don't care how many tweets right now. I'm going to be patient. 2 months in, let's say we're in 12th, which is reasonable with the strength of the Premier League and the struggles we've had with this preseason. People are going to ask for his head. They just are. Fans, like the fans that are not positive about Ange right now, we don't see them because they're quiet, and they will come up and be really vocal when he struggles, and they will blame him for everything. But I believe he at least is able to kind of talk himself out of it and keep the part of the fan base that still wants to believe in check and behind him. And I think that's going to be important in a rebuild at Spurs, because we are so bad at rebuilds and doing stuff in the correct way. So that's why I'm positive, just to come back also to what you said before. I'm positive about him specifically because I think he's a leader and a communicator in a way specifically that we.
I know Pochettino said it'd be a painful rebuild, but honestly didn't think, I'd have to endure another 4 or 5 years of Dyer and Sanchez and Co. That it'd be this painful, But look, the reason why maybe I am the way I am is because, look, last season, I got pelters for calling out Dyer and Davies and Sanchez last summer, saying they're not going to be good enough to be able to maintain it under Conte's regime, that it's physically and mentally demanding. And I called it last summer, they would not be able to cope with it, and the club need to get defenders in here in order for us to kick on under Conte. Everyone else told me, Dave, you're rubbish, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 etc., And then 6 months into this, sorry, actually, not even, come October, November, 3 months into the season, everyone's sitting there moaning, crying, screaming about centre backs. And when when you've had the best defensive managers in the world in Jose Mourinho and Conte, who are known and have set records in multiple countries for having the meanest, tightest backline there is, and they cannot replicate that at Tottenham. And then when you're bringing in Ange Postecoglou, he needs that backline to be able to succeed, especially at this sort of level. And for me, I'm not going to be naive to that situation. I'm positive about Ange Postecoglou. I really like Ange Postecoglou. I remember when his name was mentioned, I said to Jack behind the scenes plenty of times, I really like Ange Postecoglou, what he's done at Celtic. I followed him at Celtic. As Irish people, you're given Celtic as your second club. So you always keep an eye on it. And Ange Postecoglou, at the start, I was like, who the fuck is this guy? But, as you sort of see what he implements and what he was able to go on to do, you're very quickly drawn into it and getting behind it. But, at Tottenham, I don't want him to suffer the same fate that other elite level managers have done. And if we've been able to do it to elite level managers, we'd be able to do it to Postecoglou just like that. And for me, with the club getting in someone that's bringing in a style of football that fans have been craving for since Pochettino left this football club, I just want him to work out. I want him to succeed. This football club cannot keep going through, not having a manager in the dugout for a full season. We haven't had a manager in the dugout for a full season since Pochettino. The only clubs that operate like that are relegation standard candidate clubs who go through 2-3 managers every single season. And this is where my argument comes in. Last season, we would have finished, I think, just a couple of points above Everton if we didn't have Harry Kane's goals within that season and the points that he amassed, which meant we also had 3 managers. So if you didn't have Harry Kane keeping you up to that standard, all of a sudden, very, very quickly, you are the way you act. So for me, we can't continue to act like this because the warning signs are on the door. Now that the Harry Kane situation comes to fruition,
I don't want you to explode. I don't want you to explode, but you haven't even mentioned the high ticket prices, the way the club keeps.
You should join us more often if you want to make Dave explode, Simon. You should join us more often because I'm trying my best over here. We maybe need more people to help him because. I'm
saying you haven't even mentioned the way the club is so expensive to follow and how sometimes you just lack this respect of, okay, this is your club. Let's try to give you what you want.
It's just a lack of respect towards fans in general. But look, I like to think I'm one of these. I'll call it where I see fit, where I think they're doing bad, but I'll also go against the grain if people are calling it bad and I think, they've done a good bit of business, like I did with Paratici and some of the signings he's bringing in. So, I do like to think I'm level-headed that way, Jacko.
No, well, I was going to say, we talked about Paratici a couple of times and mentioned him and name-dropped him a few times, and so maybe we could sort of, finish on this sort of kind of topic here, in that I think all 3 of us here have kind of defended the Don Paratici on a few times and on a few occasions because we feel like his work was actually going a bit unnoticed or maybe underappreciated. And we kind of, again, took one of your tweets, Simon. You said, Paratici has had a huge impact on this rebuild. Basuma, Richarlison, Kulusevski, Romero, Bentancur, Udogie, Sarr, and Porro. He always said his focus was building for the future. Now you see it. Most of his signings actually suit Ange better than they actually do Conte. I think one of them, in fact, that's coming through right now is Papa Matasar. That one is aging beautifully, like a fine wine that he is.
I mean, Udogie and Sarr are brilliant signings. And I mean, this is both a positive note, but it also speaks to the fucking confusion at its leadership. Because when he came in, we were supposed to rebuild. But this also kind of, so he came in and he had a brief, basically, younger, cheaper. We need to rebuild this squad. And so Nuno was kind of an afterthought. And Nuno was forced to play in a way that he didn't want to play, which is fourth back and whatever. Because this was, Levy had written that letter, and he wanted to he wanted to fulfill that promise of playing attacking football and going younger and rebuilding the squad. The problem we've had the last couple of years is that the moment something shines, he changes his mind. And so it was valid to some extent when Conte became available and Nuno failed to go that path. It was valid because, and this is the problem we've had since that Champions League final, is our squad was in transition. So the winning now mentality when we had Luis, Eriksen, Son, Kane, Jan, Toby, like half the squad was still at their prime or a little bit older. So winning now made sense. But throughout these years, half of those players have left, and now we only have Son and Kane left. But last year, even we had Luis, Son, and Kane, and we all wanted to see them lift the trophy after almost a decade at this club. And so I get from Levy's perspective why he went from Conte, but I think Paratici did a good job of like keeping both those flames alive, going for Richarlison and Bissouma, Premier League proven players that Conte wanted, physical and suited that, at least in theory, suited his system. Porro, and then a Dogo for the future as a wing back. But what happened is because we had this confusion in basically the timing of our history, kind of you couldn't see that work. But now we're starting to see it because I don't know if it's luck or coincidence. A lot of those signings, and I haven't even mentioned Gill in there, actually fit this kind of new, young, cheap. And to my mind, this is what we should be. Like we should be the RB Leipzig. We should be the Dortmund. We should be the Brighton with more money, where we go for younger players and try to develop them and try to have this young, exciting, attacking team, and then sell for a profit. Because that's where we're at in our history. We're richer, we're bigger, but we're not at that level where we can spend like City, like Manchester United. And so trying to be that, as we did with Conte and Jose, kind of made sense because the squad was that good. But now actually committing to doing this other thing is much better. And Paratici really set us alight in that aspect.
Yeah. Dave, go ahead on Paratici. I mean, I think you found that tweet, or one of us found that tweet from Simon, and I think you and I just sort of both chuckled because we feel like we've been defending this guy for a long time with a lot of the signings that he's brought in. I feel like Sarr is one of them that has probably just been like an Easter egg type signing where all of a sudden it's just come out of nowhere and it's proven to be an absolute diamond. But he has other sort of diamonds hidden in there that have been criticized, but you look at them now and they're like, wow, that actually was some clever bit of thinking by him.
Look,
Emerson is a great example.
No, go on.
Now, Emerson is a great example of someone that was, so hated for a lot for a time there, but have really adapted and improved, and with both Conte and now with Ange.
Yeah, look, for me, I think when Paratici came in here, I think people had to understand the overall task this guy had to sort of do at Tottenham, right? Not only did he have to convince Daniel Levy that the business model in terms of the first team, in terms of the wage structure, in terms of the scouting department, in terms of the money that you're going to invest into the youth academy, he had to convince Levy to change all of that because beforehand, it was all geared to what Levy wanted. For instance, the youth academy. Everyone was under Dean Rastrick. Everyone was kept under and on the same sort of wage scale. And the decision was, well, if they're hungry enough, they'll come true. And I agree with that to a certain extent, because, I don't like these youngsters sort of getting some of the money to do, because some of them have severe talent, but end up losing the hunger which you need for your talent to sort of thrive. So, but Paratici has had to come in and say, well, but look, if you want to hold on to your best prospects that you've got coming through, and you also want to bring some of the best, you have to break that wage structure. Now Dean Rastrick is gone. There's a new guy in, and that's what we've been doing over the last while. So he's had to change that. When you look at in towards the first team, this is something that Tottenham have always sort of done. But over the last few years, the identification process has gone array. We used to do this with the likes of Modric, Bale, Aaron Lennon, Walker, Rose, Toby, not Toby, Jan Vertonghen, Eriksen. Identified them young, got them in. Let's not forget, we got Davies when he was young. We got Dyer when he was young. We got Sanchez when he was young. But the problem is they've never gone on to fulfill that. And the identification process somewhere along that has got absolutely mixed up. And Paratici is also, which brings me on to the scouting department. He's had to change that. He walked in, he laughed at our scouting department. It was non-existent. He couldn't believe that it was nowhere near the levels of other top European clubs. But that also reflects in the business that we've done under Steve Hitchen. A lot of the business that got us into this mess in the first place. Paratici, had to get the right scouts and people, the right people in place, and start getting them set up all across Europe, while Tottenham is still moving forward as a football club. You got to remember, there's no stagnation period that we can put teams to a halt and get these teams ironed out. You have to do it while the big carousel is constantly moving. Not only that, we had the squad chock-a-block with absolute shit. Doherty, Sissoko, Winks. We still got some of them here today. Dyer, Sanchez, Davies, Tanganga, Rodin. You look at so much stockpile of absolute crap, Aurier, that you have to get rid of. And in order for us to bring people in. So he's had such a big undertaking to do. And when you see the signings that he's made, he got off to a good start with the likes of Romero, improved our defense for that sort of season in general. Bringing in Kulu and Bentancur in that January, added to it, continued it on. But the problems that we didn't get rid of are the ones that have reared their ugly head since then. And they're the ones that are dictating the manager's fortunes, which means then we have to keep changing managers, which means then you change sort of the identification process to getting a couple of managers that suit certain, or getting a couple of players that suit certain managers. So Paratici has had a massive overtaking to do, but slowly he's getting there. You look at Postecoglou, a lot of the players that he seems to be playing are a lot of the signings that Paratici made for this football club. But because we weren't quick enough, or because we had so much shit pod stocked, the players that we've still had to use have brought this club down on the football pitch, which then everyone goes, okay, well, Emerson's not that good, Romero's not that good, Kulu's not that good, Bentancur's not that good. And it's like, but they are good players. We've seen them perform. We've seen them perform consistently as well. But when you've got players in crucial positions in the spine of your team holding this football club back, it also makes that the business that we have done under Paratici look crap. Whereas if we just address them issues, which we should have done a long time ago, you would see them signings come in and make the difference.
I've never seen a director of football walk into a mess like Paratici did. He pretty much had full squads that he had to get rid of, in terms of outgoings. And then he also had almost full squads that he needed to bring in terms of incomings. But I also am impressed by some of the players that he's brought in, like mentality-wise, compared to maybe what we had before. It felt like, under Steve Hitchen, a lot of the guys that we did bring in did sort of fall out with the fan base. They did have their issues where they didn't seem to cope or gel with the squad very much. They kind of needed that extra babysitting, that extra sort of kind of, time to sort of, ease their way in. Where he's brought in guys like Bentancur, Romero, who are just like, people who practically could break people's legs in half, but then also guys like Emerson, who have somehow been able to battle through all of that adversity that he received from the fan base and actually rose above it in like such an impressive way compared to players in the past. And I'm not saying that every player needs to be able to do what Emerson has done, but just it is interesting that Paratici, I do think, has brought in better mentality players like that, who have shown that they can actually compete at this high level, and they can even handle the criticism as well, even if it's completely unjustified, like I thought it was with players like Emerson. And so I'm also looking into that, and that he brought in young, talented players, but young, talented players who actually have their head together and actually seem to have sort of a bit of that confidence and swagger that's needed in order to kind of face through all of the pressure and the media kind of that goes through to you. So I feel like
I mean, the thing I remember about Paratici, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was just saying, I remember when he was when he was the managing director of football or whatever his name title was. I remember like constantly being linked with the right players. So that was one thing.
Yeah.
So even like the rumored players we were linked with, we're always like, oh, I know that player. That's like we do on Twitter when we identify and do comps and whatever.
You're always
The
satisfied.
other part is he did the business early. Like this summer we were back to doing it late and waiting and struggling to get them in before preseason. Last season they were basically all done in June. And the thing that he failed at, that we still keep failing at, that will be the down, and also now, let's say, I'll come back to that. Well, I was going to say, now the Alvarez, the release guy in South America, that's because we got scouting there now, like proper scouting.
Yeah.
So even now we can see the benefits of the structure and the money that we're pouring into. I think that the movement towards data that supposedly done is probably a good sign. But the thing that he failed at, that we still need to do, which kind of goes back to what Dave said, is we need to get better at selling players, because what we're seeing now is the same problem we've had for years. Because if you look at 2016 until Paratici arrived 2021, the struggles we see in the players that we still have on our books come from that era, that poor recruitment targeting, like getting the wrong types of players, but they're not being brave enough to get rid of them. So a lot of players are still at this club that came in at that time. But if we want to be a club that signs young players like Modric, like coming back to that, and like we're doing now with Sar, with Doge, with maybe Orban, and with this Belize guy, we need to be able, and we want to be like RB Leipzig or Brighton. We need to sell players. We can't have an owner that refuses to acknowledge mistakes and move on. Because we keep getting to this situation where we now have basically 10 to 15 guys that shouldn't be here. And one part that people keep underestimating with the Arsenal rebuild is, sure, they bought a lot of good young players and they spent a lot, but they sold over 22 players the two first years of Arteta for a loss of over $200 million, 200 million pounds. So they took a hit to get to where they are. And that's that's as big of a part of a rebuild as anything else, like being ruthless and being able to take a hit. And that there again, you see this function between what's best for the football club and what's financially best for the owner. And so we have this owner that's extremely involved in football operations, and he thinks like a businessman. He thinks in like an accountant. But I bought him for this much, so I need to sell him for this much, and I can't lose on a deal.
No, he's like Logan Roy in that way.
Yeah, so instead of getting rid of Ndombele 2 years ago for a big loss, he's kept paying him for these years and probably lost more. So there's this, and to the detriment of Ndombele and us. And I love Ndombele. But just looking at the deal we gave him as a 22-year-old, it's fucking ridiculous. The amount of money we gave this guy who's never played at a high level than the French league. Sure, he had like a couple of games in Champions League, but who gives that kind of youngster $200K a week? That's just crazy.
No,
so we have this dysfunction between these two sides where, until we do what's best for the football club, we're not going to operate at the level where we can do a rebuild in a proper way. And Paratici was great because he came in there and he had the final say. So he'd let go of players for free, and he'd buy players. If he decided he wanted the player, he would make sure that he got that player at the right time for the right tournament.
Supposedly one of the only ones that ever even challenged Levy. That was actually why he was
Apparently
even,
he
you know,
was
kind of
screaming in the boardroom. Like
he tested the status quo at Spurs. He actually
Yeah.
broke a lot of the sort of kind of culture there. And a lot of people apparently didn't like him, but I actually think that was a good sign that a lot of people didn't like Paratici because he was kind of breaking the comfort zone of a lot of people.
Yeah.
He was testing the waters. He was making people feel uncomfortable in almost a good way where he had a different style of going about things. And even though he is, you know, no longer with us, even though I kind of do think he still is kind of with us. I do love
in
that
an
he's even
advisory
left,
role.
he's almost left like a horror crux, you know, Harry Potter style behind in the case of like Gabonini. I think Gabonini is like his sort of like puppet in a way where he
I'm
basically
starting to
thinks
think,
in the same way as
yeah,
Paratici. It's
I'm
beautiful to
also
see.
starting to think he might be back. I'm starting to think that because we were supposed to have a director of football, we didn't get anyone, and we've been really quiet on that part
Dave
of
still thinks he is the
happening.
DOF.
Yeah, and I think basically they said when they changed his sentencing, where he was supposedly now he's allowed to consult, they probably just went, "You can just consult for it. Like we'll do this data
Whatever that
thing.
means.
Yeah, you consult for 2 years and then you'll get back, but in a role that's more limited, as in
Because
just
Levy
the
does like
director of football.
we're told that Levy, despite him challenging him a lot, like Levy did
Yeah.
admire him and kind of always has. And so
Something's
I
going on.
look past Levy
Something's
being
going on.
that crazy to keep
Mm.
to keep him
Yeah,
around.
no, something's going on.
Look at the signings we made this year. Vicario, we were told, was Paratici's recommendation before he left the club that he had scouted this guy. Van de Ven has been, you know, sort of flashed up, and the reason why we've got him is down to the change in the model that we now operate. So with the database model, he's flashed up on that. We've done a scouting on him. We've got him in. Ashley Phillips, we were linked with last year when Paratici was at the club trying to get him here. Many people forget that. And James Maddison has been a player that Spurs have tracked since Coventry City. So, look, most of the signs we've signed this summer have been players that Paratici or his scouting department have sort of brought to the club's attention before he was even sacked off. But one thing I just wanted to touch on just quickly was something that Simon said about Arsenal. When you look at Arsenal, their owners came in, they looked at the situation, like, okay, we've got so many years to pay off the stadium. But once that sort of, you know, the Arsenal fans sort of put pressure on them and Arsenal were no longer the club that they once were, them owners completely changed. Stan and Josh Kroenke, they knew exactly what they were then. We're investors to make this club great. They brought in Edu, who was an ex-footballer. I think if it's the guy I remember, I think he played for Arsenal. He has that connection. And ever since then, the transfers they've got in are what's best for Arsenal Football Club going forward. And they have no problem paying over the odds for certain players if it's going to make them better. Whereas with us right now, with only Paratici acting as an advisor, Daniel Levy is the one making these calls. We heard Barber, the guy on Talk Sport there not so long ago, saying, look, we brought players to the table, like a Sadio Mane, but for whatever reason, Tottenham didn't want to go that extra mile to get the deal done. And this is what's been holding us back. So somehow we need to get him completely away, you know, from the identification process and everything else, and just get him to start signing the checks and get Paratici if that's the plan. Wait for his band to come back and bring him back in, or go and get someone else that suits that database model and back it. Sometimes you have to look beyond the numbers. Sometimes you've got to recognize the quality in a player and go, okay, a bit more than what we wanted to pay, but let's just get it done because we know the benefits in the future is going to be there.
Well, Simon, thank you, sir, for just giving us an absolute just marathon of a conversation here. I think, you know, the people are going to be very thankful for just being able to just sort of sit down, us three, just sort of speak to our heart's content here. Please just tell the people what they can find. And again, from Dave and I, massive thank you. So, you know, before we go, just tell people where they can find you, you know, what they can look for, or any kind of final words from yourself.
Well, I'd like to start out with thanking you guys humbly for having me on. I'm very, very appreciative of the love and you guys reaching out. I had a wonderful time. This is why I'm a fan. This is what I like about being a fan. To connect with other people around the world. And if you want to find my stupid, silly little Spurs takes, you can go on at Simon Yamane with a Y, Y-E-M-A-N. That's one word. And say hello, and I'll say hello back.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Everybody do check out his Twitter. It's how we even brought him in on here in the first place, because I just think this man is probably on like a 98%, not 100% practically, you know, spot on accuracy, feels like, with every take. That's why Dave and I brought him on here. So if you are in the Twitter sphere and you just need somebody to, you know, sort of be able to feel like they're kind of speaking your language, they're sort of kind of, you know, seeing it from your end of things, you know, from time to time, definitely follow Mr. Simon Yamane. So that's how you say it as well. A beautiful name, sir. But yeah, everybody, hit the like button on the way out. Leave those comments down below thanking Simon for coming on. Do check out the extra bonus section if you did see that. But we will be seeing you. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
Big Ange, we trust, everybody. See ya.